Hi everyone, Alveda from Arcadier here. Today on Inspire, we have Allan Yip. Allan is currently VP of Marketing, Distribution, and Brands at Artyzen Hospitality Group. He previously was Director of Brands at InterContinental Hotels Group and Chief Marketing Officer at Dorset Hospitality Group in Hong Kong. He also had senior roles at ExxonMobil, RCI, and British American Tobacco. Lessons learned during those stints have informed his appreciation for learning for understanding what makes customers tick, and his appreciation for cross-sector pollination. Hi, Allan. Great to have you today.
Hi, Evelina. Great to be here.
Thank you for joining us. So maybe you can just tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what you'll be speaking about today.
I think you've done a full kind of introduction about myself, so I won't go into too much details.
Okay.
Before I go into cross-pollination in my later presentation, I'll just kind of share with you what I'll be covering today. Mainly, I'll try to unravel, to the audience, the mystery of branding. I think we've heard brands being brand attributes, brand tone, brand manner. It's quite complex. My approach to branding is actually to simplify everything down to a few kind of core values, and I'll just share with you my approach to keeping it simple.
Awesome. Well, let's get started right away then.
I think when we talk about branding, the world today has evolved quite a lot. The world has become very polarized with views, and I think brands today need to go beyond the functional aspects, and every brand needs to have a purpose to its existence and have what I call the human value proposition to the customers. So I'll just share with you some examples, simple examples of other brands to kind of get the message, through in a more simplistic form. So look at branding today. Traditionally, we talk about a lot of brand words about future, about attributes, about tone and manner, about functional values, etc., etc. To me, brand really encompasses only two components. The functional value of a brand and the human value of the brand. I think a lot of companies or brand companies today still focuses on communicating and identifying the functional value, and very few has actually gone into, looking at or extracting the real human value or the purpose of the brand and the purpose of its existence. Here's a few interesting examples. Condoms. If you look at the condom ads or positioning, they communicate protection. It's a functional value. You look at the different brands, they talk about the same thing, the Trojans, the Sustain, the Durex. Nothing is differentiated. Every function is the same. It's about protection. And you see that coming through the campaigns that develop. And as they evolve, they become a bit more humorous just to, attract the attention of the audience. But the functionality of the brand hasn't really changed, or the way to communicate functionality hasn't changed. They've just evolved to be more humorous, to be more creative. And then you start looking at the functionality and start asking yourself, well, what is the purpose of that function? And I think that's exactly what big brands like Durex have done. And you realize that the function of protection goes beyond protection itself. If you look at Durex, they've actually broken away from the pack and stood themselves out quite strongly as a strong brand and started communicating the real reason of the protection, and that's really, liability. And they've come up with some very creative campaign ads and communication platforms that I think has taken the consumer by surprise and has really stood up and attracted the right target audience. So here's some example. If you're not ready to pick this up, use Durex. Another example, you talk about the liability. If you use, the function of protection, keeps you from future liability. Here's another good example. $250 for a Durex, why, or $420 for a kid, right? And my favorite, as you can see, is this ad to all those who use our competitors' product. Happy Father's Day. So I think you can see how they moved away from communicating functional value into communicating what I call the human value of the brand. And that's where you see they have differentiated themselves from the pack, and they've identified themselves, the real purpose of Durex existing as far as the customer or the consumer is concerned. It's not about the protection, it's about ensuring that I, as a user, are not committed to future liability that I do not want to be liable for. That's the human value. So other examples like, being in hotel industries, obviously when you talk about hotels. So hotel brands like, traditional hotel brands like Ritz-Carlton of the world, the Marriotts of the world. You can see from this example, they talk about luxury. And what do they show? They show the whole functionality of the many facets of what hotel have to offer, from F&B to drinks, to rooms, to furnishing, to architecture, etc., etc. But what exactly is the human value of accommodation, so to speak? And then you've got the new players in town, who's really not in the traditional hotel industries, but really still in the what I call accommodation industries, like the Airbnbs of the world, and they've actually crystallized the human value to, in their world, size. Airbnb basically offer more space to the consumer than just a room. And they've communicated that human value very well. Don't get stuck in a space, But as the market evolve, as politics and social trends evolve, Airbnb has also evolved together and relook at their purpose as a brand, to the customers, to the consumers. And they've evolved to not just selling a room product, they're now talking about selling to customers, the population, about belonging, about the race. Everybody has a right to visit the world and belong. So if you can see how they have evolved, they're now talking to the customers, they're talking to the value of a human being, not just communicating the functional value. And Airbnb, for the time it's been around, the awareness of the brand, acceptance of the brand, it took traditional hotel industry decades to build that. Airbnb, by focusing on the human value of their brand, has been able to dominate this market in a very short time. So I just want to share with you something I found on the internet that's actually quite humorous, as you can see. Again, so what's the human value here for a condom?
Very interesting presentation, for sure. Lots of information, definitely very interesting branding. So politics aside, that last slide that you had was definitely very humorous for some people, might be offensive to others. So on that subject, there's a saying that, any press is good press. Do you feel like that's true for branding? If you offend somebody, does it matter as long as you're making somebody else laugh?
I think I'll go back to my earlier statement that the world has become very polarized with its views. It's no more just a homogeneous world anymore. I think brands today have to own a certain space, and whatever they communicate, whatever press that comes out or that is instigated, it has to support the position, the purpose of the brand, or what the brand means, or the value the brand has. So it's not about offending people, it's about staying true to your target customers and the customers that you share similar views of the world with.
Okay, so on that vein, how do you normally, figure out what your target customer is and what they'll enjoy, and then how do you kind of create your brand around that?
At the end of the day, you always go through the kind of standard. You look at who you are. I think a lot of companies, a lot of brands tend to target customer purely from a commercial perspective. I think commercial perspective is important, but it's more important that your company, your leadership, your culture, has a certain chemistry or culture that you think is the same type of people that you want to talk to. So you actually kind of get that match, right? It's a bit, odd to have, people who do not believe in culture marketing to a cultural group just because they are commercially viable. You will end up developing products that actually don't make sense. So I think beyond just looking at the market, you need to go back and look at who you are yourself, the product and the purpose that you as a brand, as a business, want to achieve, and find out, look for those target audience, the customers that is the right fit for you, fit for your culture, and develop your brand around them. Then you actually get that what I call handshake working.
So sometimes, or oftentimes, the actual company will reflect in the brand and vice versa.
And you see that in a lot of successful brands. You look at the Virgin Atlantic, you see the Richard Branson's culture DNA matches his customers. You look at Apple when they first started, the misfits of the world, targeting the misfits as a consumer. So it is important to understand who you are before you start talking to who you want to market to.
Got it. Okay, so not all brands or not all companies will have such a direct benefit to users as the example of Durex and condoms in general. What advice can you give our listeners to how to disseminate what their core value is, both, I guess, not necessarily functionally, but their human value, and how to clearly communicate that? I
think at the end of the day, be it condoms or Coca-Colas or alcohol pops, there is a whole myriad of function value. I mean, condoms, you talk about protection, you talk about thin, there's a whole range of functional values in every product. Like I say, Coke, what is it? Is it black sugar water in a can? Going back to the core of it it's going back to what the company wants its company to be. There's a purpose behind every company. And going back into asking yourself, the why question. You have a certain functional value that you have put into your product or your brand, even technology. I think you then need to step into the shoes of being your own consumer and be critical about it and start asking the why question, like what's from the words of Simon Sinek, why until you can't why anymore. To kind of flush out what is the true purpose of your existence. Hotels keep coming out with super high speed Wi-Fi. Okay, so why hi-fi? Why super high speed? What is it to me, the customer? I think you just have to go through that culture within the company where somebody plays the role of the consumer and keep challenging yourselves. And once you've got that cleared out, then the communication part becomes actually quite easy, because you're not communicating 50 items you're just communicating one clear message.
So on that subject, there are, for multiple brands or for hospitality and other companies, they will have multiple functions or multiple things that they are maybe great or good at. How do you normally decide, what functions or what values to kind of pinpoint and share?
I think, it goes back down to who your customer is and what value you want to bring to the customer. Let me just again give you the example of hotels and Wi-Fi. If you go through this process of why high-speed internet, and the answer comes back to high-speed internet because I want to surf the internet faster. Why do you want to surf the internet faster? Then you realize, as you do why, you may realize that, it is about the customer who's traveling on the road very frequently. I need high-speed internet so that I can go on Skype undisrupted to speak to my daughter every single night. That's the human value. And once you got that human value of you stay in my hotel, you're connected to your loved ones, then your other function comes together. If you're an international brand operating in China and you want to ensure that the American or the Europeans talk to their family back home, then part of your function becomes I need VPN inside my hotel in China because otherwise I can't connect to my daughter, etc., etc. So I think with that you still need to go back to the single mindedness of what's your human value to your customer, and you work your functional values around it.
So, working it around that, and then also during your presentation, you touched on the evolution of brands, and how I think the example was that Airbnb at first, they did the, different animals in tiny spaces, and then they, went on to the community of We Belong. How do you, what's your advice or what are your thoughts on when to know to change and evolve your branding? Or can you have multiple branding at once for the same product?
I think the brand has its core purpose. I think the core purpose applies to different people. Again, hotel can apply to, like I mentioned earlier, families who wants to. The core human value of Wi-Fi is to connect with your family. To a worker to a business traveler or to somebody who prefers entertainment, the Wi-Fi's purpose is to make sure that you don't lose out on your streaming videos, your Korean dramas, etc., etc. That's also the human value, but a function of Wi-Fi. Hence, your overall brand is about making sure that the customer continues to connect. I think to evolve the brand, the management or the leadership needs to how do I put it? Be always constantly connected to the real world. Rather than just focus on internally on your own technology or own product. Go out, talk to people, read the newspaper, have fun, get involved. Then you can understand what the real human world is all about. Then you can start evolving it. Then you realize, hey, my purpose needs to evolve because the world has changed. If you're not connected to the world, how could you be relevant and evolve accordingly?
Very true. I do think that, a lot of times, sometimes brands and companies can be very insular, and sometimes they're not really looking out, and they just are so focused on what's been working that they don't, make that jump or try to evolve. So back to Airbnb and their different human value or different campaigns that they did. One was for the tiny houses, and one's more of a community campaign. Are there different human value pockets that you could say that can be identified, so our users can maybe think about those different pockets of how they can brand themselves?
I wouldn't say that there is a predefined pockets of human value. At the end of the day, again, human value cannot be put in a box. Again, the company or the brands or the leadership of the brand of the company needs to go back to their own core value, their own products, and identify specifically what's that human value that's relevant for them. So I won't say there's a pocket of human values. I would say whether there's relevant human values that's relevant to the customers and relevant to the business.
I think relevancy is a very good point. And then, how does that relate and how do you share and communicate that? Is it via humor? Is it through like a very touching video of like a father swiping with a daughter, something like that? All right. So on the subject of strategies and branding, are there any strategies that you would advise people against using, or advise them not to, brand their companies in certain lights?
Yeah. I think it's brand is actually part of a business. I think when you talk to people, everybody has certain needs. Everybody has needs all over the place. I think the worst brand strategy or business strategy is try to be everything to everybody. You just end up being nothing to nobody. So stay focused.
Very good advice. How would you recommend people stay focused? And sometimes there are lots of different segments of people that you can go after. How do you first focus on your first segment that you want to go after?
I will go back to that same core that look inside who you are as a company, as a culture. And it's like making friends, and then identify that market segment that you think your culture, your product, your human value actually talks to. And this to me is probably the more strategic approach to identifying your customers. If you identify customers that actually has commercial value but doesn't fit into your overall company culture or your product culture, then you may just lose them over time, or somebody who's got a stronger magnetic connection with them will just take them over, and you lose all the investments behind. So, identifying or targeting your customers is like you making friends. You don't want to make fake friends just because they're rich.
So what does company culture mean to you? How does a company, identify what their culture is and then communicate that?
Oh, that's a very tough question. I think that's...
Or what is Artyzen's company culture? Or how did you build IHGs or door sets, for example?
I think for us, our culture is very much like a easy, casual family culture. I think we look after our own people. If you look at our office, we design our office for the younger generations.
Very cool office.
Yeah, we understand that human beings or workers today are quite different from the previous generations where they just slog. I think workers or consumers today are a lot more emotional. The millennial generation, we all talk about it. So I think our culture is accepting that, recognizing that, and developing products, services, environment around that recognition that our customers and even our own employees are people with views, with polarized views, with emotions, They feel like coming to work today sitting down, or the next day they feel not sitting down, they feel like standing up and working off the bar table. We can create those pockets for them.
I think it's very interesting that that does seem to be a trend within a lot of brands or a lot of companies, is focusing more on their workers, and I think that's also happening as a result of consumer behavior, as you said, like whether it's millennial generation or a change in mindset, everybody is kind of focusing now much more on you as a person versus just you as a consumer.
Exactly.
So just wrapping up, I have a couple more questions for you. Personally, what is one brand that you think does a great job with their branding and company culture?
It's not overused, but I think Apple is probably the brand that I would steer towards. I think if you look at Apple traditionally, I think when they first started, they were very clear. They were targeting, they're not the PCs of the world, they're very clear. I only target the misfits, the disruptors. It's a small market there, but they stayed focused. They are a very simple brand, they don't overcomplicate themselves. The culture of simplicity flows through the entire business. And you can see that now translate into present time where people are now gravitating towards the Apple brand because of its simplicity, because of their undivided attention to I'm only targeting this group of market. If Apple had tried to go on a strategy of let's try to get more market share of PC, I think they would have lost the game. So yeah, I would say Apple is one of them. I think the other interesting one would be Tesla. Again, very focused on they being just the tech car. In fact, they call themselves batteries as opposed to cars. This guy, Elon Musk is pretty brave. I think you probably saw from the recent news, he sent a Tesla car to space. It's probably now orbiting somewhere. So yeah, interesting. Again, actions like that talks to the emotions.
So do you think that in order to create a memorable brand, you really do have to be brave, as you just mentioned? When you described Elon Musk, does that take a lot of bravery in order to create a memorable brand, or do you think there's inherent risk?
I think there's risk in everything. I think it's always safe to communicate, tell people who you are. The function part of it. It's always risky to try to double guess what they want. But I think if you, as a brand, is able to identify the human value of your customer and tell them what they really need or they want, and it talks to them, that becomes a very strong, proposition, as opposed to just keep telling your customer who you are.
So doubling down on this, finding out your customer and really understanding them. How do you figure it out? Are there certain things that you always ask yourself about the customer, key points that our viewers should be considering when they're really defining their customer?
I think it's just through observations. I think a lot of companies spend a lot of money doing research. Research is important, but before research happens, I think there's a lot of observation. You need to observe the people around. You need to observe your customers. You need to make a hypothesis, and the research is there just to test out the hypothesis. So being observant to day-to-day human behavior, how they interact, where they eat, what they eat, the queues in restaurants, I think those are the small things that you need to be connected with. That would build a picture for you on who you think you want to target, or the type of people that you want to target, and why. Before you then put them through this process of researching, quantifying, qualifying, sizing.
So it's very interesting you say that, because we spoke to your colleague and he also underlined the importance of observation. So that's part of the company culture, is keen observation. But so sometimes you'll be creating a brand and you don't necessarily have a predecessor to look at. If you are targeting a new segment, you might not be able to observe customers per se. So how do you find or observe future hopeful customers? Do you go out to different places that have similar, like different industry that might have similar customers, or how do you do that?
I would say you look at other industries. You look at F&B industries. obviously being in the hotel line, it's not just about selling beds, it's about selling an environment. You start looking at the Starbucks and how Starbucks has evolved from just Starbucks to Starbucks Reserve. They've moved up the quality chain from just selling quick takeaway into creating their own roastery. You see where the customer is changing. That tells me where I should be moving to target this group of customers, because they are upending on the quality of even the Starbucks coffee. You look at customers who's going to stay in a hotel working off co-working space as opposed to traditional office. Hey, that tells me who my customer is. We're evolving. So I think looking at again products and behaviors outside of the industry would help me identify and target my proposition, my human value to my customers better. A hotel is beyond just selling beds. A hotel is actually a platform. It's a place where people hang out.
It's very true, and I think that expands beyond hospitality. Obviously, a lot of our users will be tech entrepreneurs, and a lot of times, you can't stay too focused on just your one industry, and there's a lot of other deciding factors or other environments that really, affect you and your company. So my next question for you, that's a follow-up, is what are there some really great examples in your, you just named Starbucks as an example of somebody that, changed slightly what they were offering. Do you have any other really good examples that people can kind of draw inspiration from?
I think there are just a lot of brands have just evolved. Coca-Cola, for example, they don't just sell Coke anymore. They sell tea, they sell water, they sell alcohol pops. They evolve with the market. McDonald's is no more just about fast food. McDonald's has gone up into salads, into quality salads. They've created a brand called McCafe, which is about high quality coffee. So I think every single brand evolves based on how the customer is evolving.
And when do you think it's important, or how do you know when to kind of evolve or pivot or add a new feature, let's say?
When you realize your business is falling off.
All right.
Yeah, I think jokes aside, I think when you're in that business segment, you obviously look at what your customers, you also obviously look at what your competition is doing. You obviously look at your own numbers. And when I'm very sure that when McDonald's starts seeing, Starbucks taking away some of the market share, or when Starbucks starts doing sandwiches, they may say, hey, customers are now gravitating towards quality coffee. Maybe we should start developing something else. So I think you just have to go through the tradition, look at your customers, look at your competition.
Fair
and
enough.
just be brave and move fast.
Moving fast. So wrapping up, promise this is second to last question. Just personally, what's your favorite way to communicate your human value? Do you prefer as a consumer to more humorous, or do you really appreciate touching, moving?
I think I tend to just communicate with a bit of humor.
Yeah.
That's probably my preferred style.
All right. So wrapping up, last question is, what's one piece of advice that you'd like to share with everybody today?
Be focused. I'll say, especially for startups, move fast. Don't get bogged down by procedures. There's all you know where the end game is. Go towards the end game and develop your own process procedures to reach the end game.
Nice. All right. Well, thank you, Allan, for joining us
Thank
today.
you.
It was a pleasure to have you. If anybody wanted to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to contact you?
Call you.
LinkedIn, email?
LinkedIn.
All right. We'll
Maybe
put the link for his LinkedIn at the bottom.
LinkedIn, email, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you again so much for joining us. Thank you, everybody, for joining this session of Inspire with Allan Yip. It was a pleasure. And until next time, be inspired.